On this special episode of Bishop's Breakdown, I'm joined with Logan Reever. Logan is currently a reporter covering Detroit Tigers and Detroit Red Wings for FanDuel Sports Network Detroit. Before coming to Detroit, he worked in Las Vegas at KLAS TV Channel 8 CBS, covering Raiders, WNBA, UFC, and other local sports. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Man, I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic. So let's break some things down. What's something sports fans don't realize about covering Detroit sports every day?
Ooh, what's something that they don't realize? Um, Probably the dedication from fans. Like, I would say the number one thing that's taken me some getting used to in like a good way is that people are so locked in on like every word, every bar, every kind of like sentence, or even just like things about your life, but like in a very endearing way. Like a great example is like I had some random bit about like how I prefer my bananas when I first started here. And I was like, I like a little tint of green on them, which to most people they'd be like, you're a crazy person for preferring them that way. But I was like, if there's even just like one single brown spot on there, I'm like, I don't want it in my smoothies, don't want it in general. And so people would start coming up to me and just being like, is this banana okay? Like, is this banana like past the test or whatnot? I'm like, oh wow, that's crazy that like people not only just like listen, but it's they really take home getting to know the people on their broadcasts, which is very different, at least than from what I've been around, even from my time in Vegas. I was in Pennsylvania before that, and then in the South before that too. And there's people that care about their teams and their sports, but it's truly so different around here, and that's because it means a lot to people. So I would say that's probably the number one thing.
Well, since you came from Vegas, how
Yeah.
is Detroit different, like sports wise?
Ooh. Oh my gosh. I would say and this is a compliment. And in Vegas, there's so many things to do, right? Like in a sense that I think that can kind of, and it's also a very different crowd. Like if you go to a Raiders game, or even it's kind of gotten to be this way a little bit with Golden Knights, like it's kind of very corporate because tickets are super expensive. There's a lot of people that are, it's very transient. People are in town, whether it's for conventions, for pleasure, like, all this different stuff. Whereas like at games here, it's born and raised by far. Like the level, it's like traditional, it's generational. The thing that's the same is that there's casinos, and there's
Right.
a lot of the same casinos in both spots, but it's very much passed down here. And I mean, Vegas doesn't have like a long sports history yet, so I guess that makes sense. Say decades from now, it might be a little bit different because it's like, hey, I passed this down to my son, this fanhood, whatnot. Like you think about it here in Detroit, you're doing that 4 or 5 generations, sometimes with at least how the Tigers go, Red Wings go as well too, and, yeah, it's just a really deep love for the teams that almost, transcends that into family in a sense too, so I think that's what makes it really special.
Well, which Detroit athlete that you've talked to personally would people not think is really nice or really mean or
Would
vice
not
versa?
think is they're all really, like, respectful, and I say that in all honesty, and I think I've been around locker rooms, and in some clubhouses at past jobs where it's not always that way. It's not always you get the time of day to talk to somebody because let's be honest, these guys have a lot going on in their lives. So you never take it personally, and I think the number one thing I've realized from being here is that pretty much everybody between the Tigers and the Red Wings that I work with, they will always give you the time of day. Even if it's a bad day, they're on like, say for example, right now the Tigers have been on a really brutal stretch, but
Right.
you'll still get these guys that are willing to chop it up with you. And, they don't have to do that. I feel like that says a lot about just the character of those types of guys and also the organization, because that's something I feel like is passed down. Because when you're trying to create a locker room, create a team, in a sense, you look for guys that all mesh together or have similar morals. And I feel like that's probably the reason that is the case, because a lot of these guys have a similar um, just respect and even everything around them. They realize that it's not the end of the world, and that's also kind of why there's a quiet confidence about them too. So
Right.
I nobody's been mean, which is the good news. The fact that I have to think about it and been like, has anybody been mean? And truly nobody comes to mind. I think a lot of guys would surprise you in that sense with how, because some can be more soft spoken, right?
Right.
Um, but that doesn't translate to anything bad. It's just just the way that guys are, and so talk to them for a bit, get to know them, and then slowly but surely to start showing another side too. Of
Well, the reason I asked is, you know how you see them on TV
course.
on the field,
Of
and
course.
they're just angry, and you're just like, well, are they that like that all the time?
Yeah, it's a great. But you're getting these guys who are in what the 2 or 3 hours where they're flipping a switch on. And so we think that that's just how they are 24 hours a day because we're only digesting how we see them in this super competitive, super, magnified setting in a lot of senses where there's high pressure games. Like, of course, you're going to think that that's the way that these guys are, but it's really not. Like, a lot of them have, such a competitive side and that are just like very sweet, like, even keel type of guys off of it. And so um it's interesting. I think that's why people think that they know these athletes is because they get these little windows into their life during a game. Um but in a lot of ways that's them at their most like heightened senses in a sense too because that's what they get paid to do. And if they weren't wired that way, then they would not have the contracts, they would not have the trust from the organization that they do to be in those spots. So I get why you asked the question too, but it surprises you sometimes too when it's like they come back from being at such like a competitive spot, and then it's just like, hey, how are you? It really is that simple at the same time.
Well, for me, see, I live in Ann Arbor,
Hmm.
so I see a lot of Michigan football players that you
Right.
would normally think are just like jerks, but I meet them and they're like
Yeah.
just like regular people.
The number one thing that it takes, I think, getting used to, because I've been in this job for almost a year now, and when because on a daily basis, you're in these clubhouses, in these locker rooms, is that it takes a minute to get used to. They're really just dudes at the end of the day. I know they paid a lot more, they got, very special abilities, and they're, like, extremely gifted and talented. They really are just dudes, and I think as soon as you start to realize that and turn your perspective on it too, is when you start to actually it's the same thing as anybody. You see, like, a celebrity in person, and you're like, "Yo, like, that's so and so, like, I'm so nervous to talk to them," and then you talk to them, and it's like, "Oh, you're a person. You're like an
Right,
actual individual," but, I think that happens over the course of time, and I think that they might have that same viewpoint, the other way sometimes with media. Because there's been athletes, like rookies or whatnot, not me personally, because 'cause I've only been doing this for a year, but, like, play-by-play guys that we have that, been doing it 30, 40 years, it's like, to them, they're like, "Hey, I've been watching you for this amount of time," so sometimes they are the ones that get a little bit nervous if it's a young
right.
enough guy in those settings on top of it too. So just people, man. It's all relationships. It's all working with people, and it's just yeah, like I said before, chopping it up with folks.
Well, let's talk Tigers. So what
Mhm.
storyline do you think people aren't noticing right now? Like I know Scooble's on IR
Mhm.
right now, and
Yeah,
that's a big deal. But what
yeah.
have you seen because you're closer than most people?
Mm. Well, it's not just Tarek. They are. I think the Dodgers might have one. Well, Tigers might have surpassed them again. Dodgers had the most injuries in the league, at least in terms of guys on IL, but the Tigers are right behind them. But after this weekend, it's two more guys that are going on IL, so they might be first. Um, Injuries aside, it's just this team has gone through stretches like this over the course of the last 2 years, which
Yep.
I think in the moment is really hard for people to remember that because it seems like the sky is falling. The guys really don't approach it that way. And that's not just me spinning it. Like, I was really surprised they had a game, yeah, yesterday in the doubleheader. They lose in this excruciating, devastating fashion in the first one. And my first instinct is like, man, I'm really curious how they come out for the second game because
Right.
they've lost 16 out of their last 18. They've lost 8 games in a row. And then you look down at the clubhouse and it's like guys are still smiling and joking and like doing their same handshakes like they were. It's not like our planet was about to crash into freaking like Venus or whatnot, or like it wasn't like doomsday apocalyptic sort of deal. And for me, that was really eye opening because you just assume that you almost think about it like a fan, right? Sometimes where it's like, wow, that I could have never come back from that. But these guys do. Like, I think the story of their lives and why they're so resilient is because they have constantly in their own lives, not just before they got to these teams, have been asked to bounce back again and again, and that's why they're in the positions they are. So when they have these situations where it's like you might think that their will is being tested, their reputations, like all of these things, they're not processing it that way. Like, they know that they're getting reinforcements on the way, but, um, so many of them go to sports psychologists, and so many of them, like, practice the deep breathing, like, the power of thinking, like, all of this stuff that if you were to log on to Twitter or X or whatnot, like, you would not have that because
Right.
everything's just such, like, a cesspool, and here's how awful everything is, but these guys, they try really hard to put themselves in environments where it's not that, where it's
Right.
just, "I won't allow anything besides, like, how can we figure this out today?" And that's why they won the 2nd game in that series, and
Yeah.
they got off to a 2-0 lead in the 1st inning, and I remember, like, in a sense, like, checking myself because I was like, "Wow, I actually kinda thought they were gonna, like, go off the rails and lose this one. I knew it was gonna be 9 losses in a row, blah, blah, blah."
Right.
Sure enough, they win the game 4-1, and I was like, it's just I think that's why sports are so great is because we have an idea of how we think things are gonna go, and then they just don't at all.
Right.
And I think
Right. Right. Right.
that's what keeps us interested, it's what keeps us intrigued at the end of the day, is that you don't know the script. You may think you've seen 75% of the script, so you have an inkling how it'll end, but then most times it'll blow you out of the water of what you think is actually going to happen, and it usually doesn't. And that's even for the people that are working closest with the team. Like, you truly, um, understanding it takes a lot of time, and I think these athletes have a really good grasp on it. I would say that's probably something that most people don't realize is that the fan perspective and what's going on with the team are two very different things. One does not dictate the other.
So how do you balance being a fan and then being objective as a reporter?
Well, at least for me, like, I didn't grow up here.
Right.
I wasn't like a, diehard Tigers fan growing up, so it's a little different for me. Um, there's definitely been times where it's, I'm employed by the teams at the end of the day,
Right.
so it's, they're the ones cutting you a check, so you gotta be objective while also, these are the guys that you're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. You gotta
Right.
be fair to what, the fan is experiencing while also keeping it real at the same time. And I think for me, that's something that, yes, I has come over time, but I still think I'm working through in a sense too, because I think, like I just mentioned, this stretch is such a great example of that. Like, you lose 16 out of 18 games, people you don't want to go on air and people don't want to hear, well, hey, here's the one good thing that they did. Like, sometimes for to appease a sponsor, we might have to do it. It's like, hey, here's your blah 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 player of the game or whatnot. But keeping, like, I think fans, especially here, because they're really intelligent sports fans, they know what's authentic and they know what's disingenuous, and if you're to try to, like, paint a picture or something that's not truly what's going on right now, or, you know, beating around the bush of, like, the main storyline, which is that the team hasn't been very good right now, then you're gonna start losing credibility within those fans too. So, I would say it's been a lot of that, and so I wouldn't say it's the fan element for me, but when you're working for a team and you're seeing these guys, like, of course, you wanna prop them up on a consistent basis, but, sort of getting your letters in a way is just being truthful with what the state of affairs are right now, and so I think that it's a really difficult thing to balance when you go through a stretch like this one, but when you get out of it, I think that's what makes it really rewarding because it's like, "Okay, I didn't put on, just a brave face, I didn't just, it wasn't all sunshine and lollipops the entire time, even during that losing streak." So when you get out of it, you start to build a lot more rapport and credibility from fans on top of it too.
Right. True.
Mhm.
So how about your career? What's your favorite moment that you've been a part of so far?
Ooh, I would probably say being a part of a walk off earlier this season and unbeknown to me, getting a Gatorade bath, which I did not plan on, but that happening, that was kinda surreal, like, I remember watching reporters growing up and being like, "Wow, that's crazy," and then it happened to me, and it was one of those moments that I'm like, "Wow, I'm now the person that I used to watch." So it's which you don't always connect 2 and 2. Sometimes
Right.
you're going along on a daily basis, and then you kinda blink, and then you're in a much different spot. Even before this, covering a Super Bowl was up there for me because I think I covered the Super Bowl, the 2nd one between the Chiefs and the 49ers when I was in
Okay.
Vegas, one of my last years there. And for me, like, I remember one of my first memories just in life was a Super Bowl, and I think that that's kind of what got the initial love of sports at its core there. And so to cover that game, and as good of a game as it was, that was very, like, surreal. I'll always remember this type of moment. So, the great news is that they keep happening, all of these moments. And so I think for me, it's led to a lot of appreciation to just be in this job, be in this city, um, in a place where it matters to people too. So I'm sure I will have 5 to 10 things even in the next 2 years that will be at the top of that list here too, especially with the way the teams, have been trending in positive directions.
Yeah, especially like the Pistons and hopefully
Yeah,
the
man.
Bulls.
Oh yeah, all these squads.
So, how do you think sports media has changed with people having podcasts, with X, with Facebook, Instagram, TikTok? Everybody's a reporter.
Yeah, I think it's I actually have discussed this with friends a decent amount. I always when people ask me, they're like, "Hey, what should I do, to try to get in the spot that you're in one day?" And for me, I'm always it's might sound like weird advice. I'm like, you don't have to take the path that I did. Like when I was coming up in it, it was like you have to start in local, well, I should say even before that, you have to go to school for journalism, you have to start in like local news, um, kind of climb the mountain of that, eventually get to a regional sports network. Like now it's not that way at all. Like somebody can start a YouTube page tomorrow, and if they get enough of a following, you can then get the same credentials to cover a game as the ones that we do. Like it's different avenues and different platforms for how you're consuming it, but there's no and it's good and bad, right? Like it's good in the sense that it allows for all of these opportunities and people that say if you're not in a financial situation to go to school, you can still get your voice out there and get to the same stage. I would say the way that it's bad sometimes is that like I don't know if this is a great example, but like I look at some of the like, UFC events and I know that they're very like it's very theatrical at its core, like it's very entertainment based, but like some of the questions for guys there are like if any of my professors, journalism professors, remotely heard half of the questions that are asked at those things, they would lose their minds. And so I think we've now gotten into this murky territory where the ethics of it all are a little bit off balance. And I'm not sitting here being like I'm Walter Cronkite. I ask terrible questions sometimes too. Like that's just the reality of it. But I think when you when you haven't sacrificed for like not just the college, but like, I was in local news for 8 years and it was a grind. And it really makes you fine tune a lot of your skills to get to that point. Whereas, if you're somebody who just had that situation and you just were on like a YouTube page or you were just on TikTok and now you have this credential and you're asking if you get to the point where you can ask LeBron James a question in the NBA finals and and he's like, "What are you talking about?" Like that's kind of the result of that, in a lot of ways. So it's good and bad. It allows those more opportunities, but at the same time, I think that's why you're seeing a lot more people in the industry, people that used to be writers for newspapers. Like you think about PTI and like these shows, like these guys were all columnists
Yep.
for decades before they got this platform and this voice that they're then using, and they're cherished for that exact reason. And then you kind of look on some of the sets of these shows and you're like, who the F is that guy? Like
Right.
it's just this like unknown element. So I think that's why you get a lot of people who have been kind of kicked to the curb unless you're a former player on some of these networks that haven't gotten as many opportunities too. So I'll be very curious where it goes in 5 to 10 years from now because I think there's been a lot of that upheaval and change just within the last 5 to 10 years. So be curious where it goes from here too.
I mean, so for me, I go to Dan Patrick's School of
Mhm.
Sportscasting in Full Sail.
Yeah.
So when I was looking for a job on Indeed, just to get myself prepared for the future, I seen that you need, 4 years experience, 3 years on air experience. So
Right.
that's why I made my podcast because I figured
Yeah.
at the very least I could say, "Oh, look, I've done it for 3 years, and here's
Yeah.
my track record. Here's my videos. Here's my audio."
Yeah.
And do you think like things like that will be helpful for people like me to show that I have the experience?
Absolutely. I think anything in this spot, and that's another part of it too. It's like the how do you get to this point? It used to be like, hey, you have to be at a top 50 market by this age. You have to be in this city by this age. Like, no, you really don't. you have to have just reps. Reps are the most important thing, and if you just keep repping it out over the course of time, eventually you're gonna get so not just comfortable in your own skin, but something that you bring to the table, and it's also important to have multiple avenues, like at least for me, like social media is a big thing that I'm a part of. And then it's like the job itself. If you can have a podcast, if you have all of these different forms, it's like, hey, I'm not just like I'm a a renaissance person. I'm a Swiss army knife of the amount of things that I bring to the table. And that's the industry these days. If you can only do one thing, then you truly don't have enough. Like you have to have multiple things that you bring to the table to even be considered. And that's how it was, at least at the local news level. It's like, I think about those 8 years of jobs, like, I had to write, edit, shoot, produce, then you're doing on it and that's even just to be considered in these roles. That's why the going on air part was the easy part, because all the
Right.
stress was all of the other stuff. It was the cramming, for hours before and then, like, 30 seconds before the deadline, before the show starts, you're still cramming and working on things until you get on air, to the point where the on air element is like, "Okay, well, this is I'm just glad that I got on air, so this is the easy part." Um, so, yeah, I would say that that's, um as long as you can just continue to be like, "Here is enough evidence of what I bring to the table," and then internships were huge for me, like, I talk about going to college, where I went to college at Emerson in Boston, which is a great journalism school. But the internships were truly where I learned the most, because that's also where I made connections with people that I still see in random ways to this day. Like one of the guys from like my very first internship I saw during the first 2 months of when I started with the Tigers last year, and it wasn't even anything planned. So it was just, yeah, it's been really unique to see how, like, all of the work that you start years ago, how it always comes full circle and back around if you just continue to put in the work and the grind.
So, like, I've learned how to do stand-ups and,
Mhm.
because it's just me. So,
Yeah,
I do all my editing, I do all my research, my writing,
yeah.
all for my podcast, and I really think that, this is helpful for me going forward. So for you, what did you learn from school that you always go back to?
From school that I always go back to. I mean, I had some really it was great, but I had some really strict professors too. Like, I remember there's the story I always tell my, like, senior capstone, my, teacher who, unfortunately is no longer with us, but is, a legend just in terms of the Boston um, news media and whatnot. And she was really hard on us, but she used to, when we would be doing like live stand-ups in February in Boston in like 5-degree weather, we'd all have to sit there. And if anybody had, like, even right now, like, I got a little bit of stubble going, but like if somebody had a beard or their hair was too long, she would be like, "You have to cut that." And then everybody would have to wait while they just went and got like a haircut or like a trimmer, a razor, and we just had to be there. And in a lot of ways, it prepares you for how hard the industry can be sometimes, at least at the start. And so when you're in that class, you're in that moment, you're like, man, you don't want to be like F this, but you're just like, you don't get why they're doing it in the moment. And then as soon as you graduate, you go on to these things. It's like when you start being prepared in those hard moments, it's like if I never had that experience, as ridiculous as you might have thought it was in those moments, like you're going to be tested those things in the real world. And I think something that's really important is that it's almost like a game, right? Like mimicking a game setting as much as you can. So if you've already experienced some of the tougher things, when you get into the rough moment in your career, you're like, "Oh, I've been through this before." So it doesn't phase you, and I think a lot of people, that's sometimes why they get terrified of the stage, is because they haven't, like, been through things, or they haven't, gone through just the ringer of what this industry and job asks of you. And that's also why it's so rewarding, is because once you get over that hump, it's like it really weeds people out. That's why journalism, I want to say, if it still is, at least it was when I was in school, it was the number one or two, like, most switched major in the country, because people get in it and they're like, "Oh, this is not what I thought it was gonna be," and they switch paths, which I don't blame anybody. Like, it really asks a lot of you, but if you love it really dearly, like I have always loved it, then you will get out what you'll get out what you put into it. And so, That's why you find a lot of people who are really passionate about it is because they've really gone through some things to get to that point too. So, I know that wasn't like a pleasant memory of what I always take with me. There's a lot more good stuff, but that's just kind of an example that represents, at least what it took to get to the point where I'm at now.
Okay, so before we close this up,
Mm.
I want to know a prediction. So where do you think the Tigers are going to be in October? Are they going to be
Oh
at home
man,
or are they going to be in the playoffs?
you are asking, wow, you are asking some
Because I
hard
know
hitting
there's a lot of
questions.
season.
Oh my gosh, man, that's especially right now. You know what? It's so early in the year. I think people are hanging on to hope. There's really only been 3 teams that have been in this spot and then turned it around to make the playoffs, and look, that's very exclusive error class. I do think that there's a chance, especially with the division way the division is lining up right now, there's a chance you might have to hover around 500 just to be in the conversation for this, and if I think if that's the reality, if you get teams like Cleveland, Minnesota struggling, if Chicago kind of, dips below a little bit of the water. I know they've been playing well at the start of the year. I think the Tigers will find themselves in the conversation at the end because the American League is not it's really weird right now. The teams are very like everyone's I think trying to find their identity. The Tigers being one of them. I mean, it's really hard to find an identity when you have as many injuries and the guys that you can identify with are quite literally not out on the field. I think they'll be able to find that when guys come back. And the most important thing is if they can stay healthy on top of it too because you've seen teams before where the injury bug at the year starts and then it just kind of keeps rolling that way. It's a weird
A
the
snowball.
injury bug isn't a contagious thing. I don't know why it is, but if this team can even that out and not have that be a year-long problem and they can get these bodies back, they'll find themselves in the conversation. The AL Central, it feels like it always comes down to the last week, and so I think
Usually does.
Cleveland was down by 15 and a half games last year. We were talking with their reporter. They said they used the Tigers as an example the year before for making them a comeback. So why not use the team that they use their example to use for a comeback to use that then against them at the same time too? So I think that at the very least, last 2 weeks of the season, you'll still be seeing Tigers playing significant games. If they can pull it off, then you're gonna have to come back and clip this and be like, "Wow, Logan Reever really knew." But that
Hey,
would be a hell of a prediction.
I'm going to hold you to that. So hopefully in October, I'll go
No,
back
I
to.
just I hope that would make me look actually decent probably for the first time in a minute. So I would hope that would be great, and it'd be great for us too. So
Oh, yeah.
wishful thinking at the very least.
Great for the city.
Oh yes, that's all that matters. As long as it's not windy and snowing out, which it felt like it's been for the last 7 months. The
Yes,
city's
it
gonna be
has.
in good hands anyway. So
Well, get
it'll be
used to it because it's always like that.
great.
'Cause I
I
actually
hear
I
you.
a quick story, I had to do a stand-up, and my instructor is in Florida. So he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you have to go out and do it," and then it's January,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's negative 20 degrees, and he was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I forgot you're in Michigan." So
Yeah.
I'm bundled up to the gills just doing a 5-second stand-up, you know?
That that's what I'm talking. That's when you really test your love for what you're doing. It's those
Like,
moments. You start to be like, "Man, what am I doing this for?" And then you gotta be like, "'Cause I love it." That's at the end of the day, I
especially when
love
I was by myself.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Man,
I'm
I
sitting
love
there
being
like,
out and
"Should I
just
really
making
do this?"
Yep, exactly. Exactly. But
Well,
here you are.
I really appreciate this.
Yeah, of course, man.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll do this again, but, until next time, thank you very much, and this is Bishop's Breakdown. Have a great day.
Thanks.